This is the grave of a woman who lived here in Maryborough, Queensland, and was the central figure in one of the most mysterious disappearances the state has ever seen. Her name was Mary Josephine Thompson, but everyone called her Mollie. And one day in 1942, she simply vanished.
The matter was more than curious from the very time 24-year-old Mollie was seen treading lightly down Bazaar Street at 6 a.m. on the 11th of August, wearing little but pyjamas, a light coat and no shoes. It was winter, and even in Maryborough it gets cold. When seen, she was alone and was not carrying anything.
Her mother told police that she heard Mollie leaving their home here in Adelaide Street at 4 a.m. If that was the case, where did she go or who did she see for 2 hours before being seen in Bazaar Street? That was reported in the local paper, but the story only rated a couple of paragraphs on page 2 the next morning. The missing woman was not named. The article said her parents were anxious as to her safety and welfare. Parents? Mollie's father died 14 years earlier in June of 1928. The article contained no quotes from police, no interview with Mollie's mother Ruby Thompson, and no evidence of any attempt to locate and gather information from anyone who might have seen Mollie. Meanwhile, the search that started around the centre of Maryborough and included the temporary wartime military accommodation on the local showgrounds had now spread over a wide area. The banks of the Mary River were scoured, as were the air raid shelters built in case of enemy attack. The town's water tower on the corner of Ann and Adelaide Street was inspected on 3 separate occasions with no result. Surely newspaper coverage would pick up if she wasn't found quickly. 4 days after Mollie disappeared, her story was still just getting 7 lines below the personal column on the bottom of page 2. 5 days missing, and finally Mollie Thompson was named as the missing person. Even after 10 days, Mollie's story was now apparently worth just 72 words in the middle of the second page. There was seldom mention of Sergeant Fay, her RAAF boyfriend, and never a mention of the siblings, 2 brothers and 3 married sisters. And then, on that very day, Friday the 21st of August, as police were still patrolling the river, word came that the council plumber, Fred Prickett, who had gone to the top of the massive water tower to fix an indicator that wasn't working, saw Mollie's body in the water. This was the tower that had been inspected 3 times over the course of the 10 days Mollie had been missing, although we don't know whether that inspection included dragging the bottom or whether it was just someone sticking their head over the top to take a look.
The discovery sent shockwaves through the Maryborough community, with many believing Mollie was a victim of foul play. The proposition that she had managed to get up the tower alone was too hard to accept. Last seen in Bazaar Street, Mollie's movements, according to investigators, next went like this.
From here, Mollie went somewhere to pick up a 7-foot, that's a bit over 2 metres long, wooden ladder. She carried it to the tower, managed to get to the top of the ladder so that she could reach the bottom rung of the tower steps, then pulled herself up, climbed to the top and threw herself into the water.
The council plumber, Fred Prickett, acknowledged
it would have been extremely difficult for Mollie to get onto the bottom of the tower ladder, but I found a 7-foot wooden ladder the same day I found Mollie's body.
But there's another and much more curious question. Why was that ladder still lying there? Fred found it 10 days after Mollie supposedly climbed the tower. Surely, if the tower had been inspected 3 times since Mollie disappeared, the ladder would have been seen and taken as evidence.
the latter had to be the link in this bizarre mystery, for a fair proportion of the 15,000 or so Maryborough residents understood the impossible task for a 5 foot 5 inches tall or 165 centimetre girl to gain access to the bottom of the stairs that were at least 7 feet or 215 centimetres above her head, well out of reach. Clearly she would need something to stand on.
The other possibility is that the wooden ladder wasn't there until the day Fred went to fix the indicator, in which case it probably has no bearing on Mollie's disappearance. And that again raises the question of how did she reach the bottom rung?
At the subsequent inquest, no evidence appears to be offered about who owned the ladder or where it had come from, and no one is recorded as asking about it. But there was another theory offered, that Mollie, a Catholic by religion, was involved with an Air Force sergeant who was a Protestant, and perhaps she was concerned about people's perception of her morals. The Truth newspaper carried a report of a letter she wrote to her mother in which she says,
"Men stare at me wherever I go. What can I do about it? If something should happen to me, have my body examined, so as to let others know what the cause really was. Don't let others go into as blindly as I have."
Her mother testified that Mollie had been in steady work for 3 years and had been examined by a Dr. Hooper on the day before she disappeared. His opinion was that she was well, apart from a nervous rash, and unlikely to do anything to harm herself.
The GMO, Government Medical Officer, gave evidence that the cause of death was due to suffocation and drowning, and that he failed to find any bruising or lacerations on Mollie's body. He said,
"I am satisfied there are no suspicious circumstances. The deceased, through her nervous conditions, is entirely responsible for her own actions."
There was no further explanation of the GMO's causes of death, and so it was that the passing of Mollie Thompson was assigned to the suicide file.
Despite many Maryborough residents' reported refusal to believe it, there was one more curiosity in this macabre tale. It seems, apparently by chance, that the good folk of Maryborough were spared the horror of actually drinking and bathing in water in which a body had been decomposing for 10 days.
At the inquest, Fred Prickett, council plumber, was able to reveal again without explanation why the water from the tank in which Mollie's body had been found was shut off some days prior to August the 11th, the day Mollie disappeared. All very strange.